Well, quickly before the meeting starts, I want to say how nice it is to see JR back on the board.
Oh, yes, he's great.
Very, very nice.
Yep.
Very nice.
Yep. We're thrilled to see JR and thrilled that he was willing to
Yes.
sign up again for this. Yeah, he's just brings a whole ton of experience to the position.
Okay, I have that it is 4 o'clock. So this is Bethany Griffith live from my home office instead of Monticello, bringing you the Johnson County Library Board of Directors regular meeting via Zoom. We are live on Facebook so that our meeting is still public. Everything will follow our usual agenda, and we will start with any citizens' comments. Sean, has anything been sent in via email?
There have been no comments directed to the board through email this month.
Okay, fantastic. Do any members of the Johnson County Library Board have remarks? I'm going to take that as a no. I do not really have any remarks other than I think, like everybody, we would rather be in person and not doing, I don't know, phase 5,000 of cooties, but it is what it is. So we are meeting remotely this time. Our budget meeting will be remote, and we will decide closer to the time in February, depending on numbers and advice from the health officials and people with far more experience than me as to whether or not we will be in person or will be remote. Do we have a presentation from the Friends of the Library?
Yes, we do. This is Shanta Dickerson, Ops Director for the Friends of Johnson County Library. So just want to say thank you, Madam Chair, this afternoon for having me, as well as members of the board and Commissioner Hanslick and Mr. Sean Casserly for giving me this time to report on Friends progress on behalf of our executive committee. I'll touch on a couple of subjects in our report today, which detail recent activities. The first is financial support to Johnson County Library. With our 4th and final quarterly weeds payment in December, the Friends have provided $50,000 in financial resources to Johnson County Library throughout 2021. For some of you who may not be aware, these payments are made in exchange for all materials that are withdrawn from the collection, and they are a direct line item in the library collection development budget. So we don't get the joy of the big check presentation. It's not quite the same exchange of funds, but no less impactful. We do recycle all insoluble materials that we receive. And while a significant portion of the ex-library materials we receive are obsolete, and donations as well, damaged beyond repair, are just generally unsellable. While not inexpensive, assisting our library in keeping discharged items out of landfills is a service that we value tremendously. Next up, after much careful effort and planning, as I think many of you have heard about our strategic planning and business planning that we have just invested so much time and are so grateful to the library and the foundation for working with us on those plans. We're now in the testing phase of our sort to sell concept as outlined in those plans. The concept's not new. Friends groups across the region and the nation have moved to this model with much success, but it is new to us. We held a couple of Saturday afternoon pop-up sales in December. Net sales exceeded $1,200, which is noteworthy, given just a small launch that we had. To put that in perspective, that dollar amount is comparable to a full month of sales at either one of our longstanding library bookstore locations. We are already seeing how efficient and effective it is to operate in a single space. And we're currently closed. Construction started today at our Friends facility. So we're eager for our next round of sales once construction wraps up at the end of this month. And if you have not received notice of those sales, that might mean that you're not a member. And so we need to fix that. So consider joining or renewing at joinjclfriends.org. So we look forward to seeing our friends again here in the spring. And we thank each one of you for joining us in our support of Johnson County Library. And I'm happy to take any questions you have on behalf of the Friends.
Thank you very much. I don't think there are any questions, so we will move on to the foundation. Miss Stephanie, are you here?
Here. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Solsteimer. I'm delighted to report on behalf of the foundation. Top of mind this time of year is the year-end donations. So we have an annual appeal that starts in November, and you've been hearing about it, and it concludes this time of year. So it's going really well. I don't have numbers for you. I will have them next month. But of note is we received a couple of gifts. One is from Henderson Engineers. They donated $3,000 for Elementia, the Teen Literacy Arts and Magazine program. And we received a gift of $1,000 for the Law First Civic Engagement Fund, which is just fabulous. And we received another $1,500 for the Joanne Berkeley Writers Fund. So it's really remarkable to see who gives at the year end for the annual campaign. And I look forward to reporting on that next month. In addition, this year, we had a couple of other gifts of note, 2 separate individual donors that will benefit the collection. One is $10,000 for large print books. So that's an individual donor who really believes in this area for the collection. And then another $10,000 for audio and downloadable books. So while we don't typically identify wanting specific designated funds restricted, when at this amount of money, it's really nice to be able to work with the library to facilitate that kind of gift. And then as we kick off 2022, we do have a virtual appreciation event scheduled for this Sunday with Johnson County Library's own Greg Windsor, Reader's Advisory Librarian. He's going to share his must-reads for 2022. This event is on Zoom. It'll be fun and interesting for our most loyal and generous supporters of the library, who are volunteers, friends, and donors. If you want a link to the event, let me know if you haven't signed up yet. It'll be a fun hour. We got a preview of it today. It's going to be pretty neat. Greg is very charismatic, and it'll be fun. And there's a couple of things. We did have a VIP tour planned for January 28th, but that's been canceled. We also had a tri-board event planned, and that's been canceled, but we will get those rescheduled, at least the tri-board meeting for sure. And as we close out 2021, the foundation wrapped up its 25th anniversary. We are amazed and grateful for the ongoing support from donors, volunteers, and friends of the library. So thank you so very, very much. That concludes my report. Are there any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Always good to hear from you. Commissioner Hanslick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of updates from the county. First of all, we had our usual Thursday morning meeting today, and the board voted to continue our virtual meetings through February 17th because of the community spread of COVID, but also because we are trying to maintain county operations, and we're seeing the impact of illnesses and positivity rates on our staff. And so we're trying to maintain those operations and keep people well. Also, as of last Thursday, the board voted to continue with the current health order, which requires masking of kids in K through 6. And that will continue. Now it'll be reviewed in 5 weeks. But those are the COVID, COVID all the time is kind of the theme right now. I also wanted to take an opportunity to give you just a little bit of facilities update. I know there's a lot going on with the library, and you are all aware of that, but there are other facilities updates from other parts of the county. You may have seen that last month, the Board of County Commissioners had a ribbon cutting for the county square. And that is the place in Olathe that was the site, or is the site, of the former county courthouse, which was demolished and has made space for a wonderful community park of sorts. And we had that dedication. All of the Rotary clubs in Johnson County contributed to the initial investment in a tree grove there, and I'm especially proud of that because I'm a Rotarian myself, and we look forward to the continuing development of that area. And I know that the folks in Olathe are especially happy to have that new space available in downtown Olathe. Also exciting, at least it always excites me, wastewater. The new Tomahawk wastewater treatment plant is nearing its final completion. Last September, the plant started operations, and within the next few months, it should be 100% operating. And the significance of that, if you're not aware, is prior to the new wastewater treatment plant, the Tomahawk plant, Johnson County we didn't have enough capacity to treat all of our wastewater. So we had to send it over to Kansas City, Missouri for treatment. And at a very, very expensive rate. And so all of the figures pointed to the effectiveness of building a new plant and allowing Johnson County to treat 100% of our own wastewater rather than paying Kansas City, Missouri. So very excited about that. And I think it's really important to note that Johnson County wastewater rates are the second lowest in the metro area. I think only Lee's Summit is maybe lower, but so we're getting a good bargain. I think we take for granted that we can turn on the water, it goes down the drain, or flush the toilet, and we don't have to worry about it. We have an excellent system. And in that same vein, the next big Johnson County wastewater project is the Nelson wastewater treatment plant, which is up near I-35 and Rowe Avenue or Knoll, around that area. That plant is very, very old, outdated, no longer meeting the environmental requirements. And so the plans are underway to begin replacing that. And the reason I bring that up is because a major part of that is moving the household hazardous waste program that's currently located on that site. And I'm very excited because the facilities are in the process of purchasing some land over near 69 Highway and I-30, or excuse me, in College, over near the Middle Basin wastewater treatment plant, that will allow us to have a much more centrally located hazardous household waste program, and also hopefully be able to have more of a one-stop recycling shop at that same area. So you could bring your hazardous household waste, your glass, your paper, everything to one spot. And to me, that's especially important for people who live in apartments, because a lot of apartments do not offer recycling. And I know those folks have to drive to several different locations to take their recycling. So that's exciting. And then finally, I just wanted to mention Meadowbrook Park. It is undergoing another phase of development, adding an accessible playground and accessible restrooms to make that beautiful new park even more useful and attractive for our residents. And so finally, I will just, as I always do, the book I am currently reading is by another one by one of my very favorite authors, Eric Larson, and it's called In the Garden of Beasts: Love, Terror, and an American Family in Hitler's Berlin. And this is a true story of the ambassador Dodd, who was the ambassador to Germany during Hitler's rise. And it's a fascinating book. And Eric Larson is just an incredible writer. I say it's just like eating candy out of a box. He's such a great writer. So with that, if you have any questions, and be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you very much. If you are a fan of other World War II history, Commissioner Hanslick, and anyone listening, I can definitely recommend Stephen Ambrose, who has a similar style to Eric Larson, that it almost reads like a novel would, even though it's it's real facts, real people, but there's something about the way in which he writes that he makes these real individuals feel almost like characters. And so he wrote Band of Brothers, but wrote many other books. Fascinating one on Custer and Crazy Horse, on how the Transcontinental Railroad was built. Just same kind of vibe in terms of writing style that made, for me, history books far more accessible. My husband could read anything that was almost Valium in paper form, which I cannot do. And so another fantastic writer, if that kind of historical vibe is your thing. Thank you very much also for the update on wastewater. I know everyone appreciates clean water and indoor plumbing, so yay for that. Anybody else have any questions or comments for the commissioner? Okay, then I am guessing we can move on. Thank you very much, madam. And
Thank
Mr.
you.
Logan.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have been asked to comment on the role of the Friends and Foundation and their relationship with the library. And then I think for comparison purposes, to talk about the relationship with the Olathe Public Library. And this is good and gives us a good comparison of our relationship with various very important entities. The relationship between the library and the Friends organization and the foundation is defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Both of those organizations are defined as what the code calls supporting organizations of the library, meaning that they have a very specific mission of supporting the work of the Johnson County Library. And they qualified for that treatment, and that's the treatment that they're given under the Internal Revenue Code. So the Friends, through the book sale, You heard a report on that. The foundation, through its many fundraising efforts, you heard a report on that. That's how they support the library. That's the sole purpose for those organizations, is to support the Johnson County Library in different ways. Then we have the relationship with the Olathe Public Library, which is reflected in the interlocal cooperation agreement addendum that you are being asked to approve later this evening. It's hard to believe now, but Mona Carmack was a fairly new county librarian when discussions were begun with Olathe to establish a cooperative relationship. In the early 1980s, for example, there was no formal cooperative relationship between the two library systems. In the late 1980s, discussions got underway to establish, with the idea being that we ought to benefit library patrons in both library districts with a cooperative agreement. And the agreement was approved. The initial agreement was approved on May 17th, 1989, and it's been renewed annually since then. And the latest iteration of that, you are being asked to approve this evening. So it has certainly evolved over the years. Just think in terms of all of the online ramifications in that almost 33-year period now. But it has been maintained. It was a very early cooperative relationship among Kansas libraries, was a leader in that regard, and it continues to exist today. And you're being asked to approve another iteration of it, to reapprove that agreement today with the amendments reflected in the amendment document. So I think that's my report. Madam Chair, are there any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Casterly, it is your show now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean Castley, County Librarian. Starting off, I want to thank the Friends for the $50,000 that we can put towards the collection. And I also want to thank the foundation for their end of year giving and all the kind of innovation they did in 2021 to continue fundraising and supporting the library. So let's start. I'll invite David to give us the financial report, and then followed that by Adam giving the monthly statistics. David?
Thanks, Sean. Dave Rodney, Finance Director for the library. Just going to direct you to page 9 of your board report. It's the total revenue report that's provided monthly. We will cover, I'll briefly cover where we sat as of the end of November 2021. So at the end of November 2021, 92% roughly of the year would have passed. And where we were financially at that point, we had collected a little over 40.6 million, which would represent about 97% of expected revenues. We're a little ahead of where we were in 2020, with still some lagging revenues in our copying, printing, overdue fines and fees. As we've reported in the past, we should be fine, because from an expenditure standpoint, and cover this below, we had about 34.9 million either spent or encumbered as of the end of November, which is roughly about 83%. So we're tracking to have significantly less expenses than the amount of revenue we may be short. So, and with that, I will, that's my report for this month, unless there's any questions. I do think there was something else also on the agenda where it was just talking about our budget process timeline. So I just wanted to let you know, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in this meeting. We've got an informational item, which is the 2023 to 2027 capital improvement plan. So we're asking just to kind of quickly go through the review of that this month, with approval next month with the board. We'll also, in February, we're planning on covering our 2023 personnel requests that we plan to make with a library budget committee meeting we have planned next week. We'll kind of cover our multi-year forecast with them, and then hopefully be able to bring back to the library budget committee a balanced budget summary as we get closer to our April board meeting. And that's April meetings when the library board would take action on a 2023 budget proposal. With the library budget presentation to the Board of County Commissioners yet to be scheduled, but sometime probably mid to late May, early June. There's some subsequent Thursdays that have been set aside, but an actual date yet to be established for that. All of which then heads towards an August public budget hearing that's conducted by the Board of County Commissioners, and then September adoption of the 2023 board. So just kind of wanted to cover that just so this board was aware of some of those dates and in time coming up here. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
I wanted to say thank you, Dave. Not seeing any questions. One of the things that I want to commend Dave for, and really the entire management staff of the library, is that they've, during this couple of years, we're in our third year of COVID, David and his team have been able to really watch our expenditures with the goal of building our reserves. We have very healthy reserves, but with some of the upcoming projects that we have, particularly with Corinth and Blue Valley, we're able to cash fund those, and that's reduced the amount that we're going to be debting, and also reduce the burden of interest rates that we may see on those loans. So I want to say thank you very, very much, Dave. Your team's done a wonderful job. Next, I'd like to have Adam come up and talk a little about this month's statistics, and then followed by Amber Slater is going to be talking about what's happening with our volunteers.
Yes, thank you, Sean. My name is Adam Wathen. I'm the Associate Director for System-Wide Services for Johnson County Library. And I'll direct your attention to our monthly statistics. As usual, I'm showing our physical circulation trend and our digital usage trend here. That our physical circulation continues to lag, and this is not surprising because our central library is closed. We have a significant portion of that collection that is unavailable. Although news this week that we were able to get in there and pull some holds that had been locked away and deliver those to the system. So that collection is coming back online, and it will be available when we reopen Central soon. So that physical circulation trend still lags a little bit as of last November, and the digital usage trend is still above 2019 levels, but it lags below 2020, which was a boon for digital usage because of the COVID impact. And then on the next sheet, you'll see our visitation trend, and the visitation trend is still pacing alongside the above previous year and below 2019 levels, and that's also been the trend. And so if you don't have any questions, then I would be glad to turn it over to Amber Slater for volunteer statistics.
All right, thank you, Adam. My name is Amber Slater. I'm the Volunteer Services Coordinator with Johnson County Library. We'll go to the next slide here. I think it's really exciting. This year is 70 years of volunteers being a part of our library system. We wouldn't be here today without them. So it's really great to see that volunteers are still an integral part of our library system. Next slide. So I wanted to show you a little bit of our kind of what's going on with our volunteers in 2021. So you can see these are probably some of the areas where the majority of our volunteers served with us. They served in about 58 different opportunities last year. And about 58% of our volunteers help with, I would say, library specific tasks, and about 50% with our friends specific tasks. So really important the work they're doing. You can see some of those hours of service that they have served with us. If you want to translate that into what does that look like, kind of value, it's about $637,000 worth of service that they provided last year. So we really appreciate all of those contributions, especially from people who are volunteering their time and coming in and wearing masks. So we so appreciate that. If you want to go to the next slide, just kind of a little bit of where the majority of our volunteers are serving. You can kind of see how those hours break down. So our volunteers contribute the equivalent of almost 11 full-time employees last year. When you think about kind of what are the costs with the volunteer program, and if you what are we spending on our volunteer management software, recognition, staff time? If you combine both the library as well as our friends and our foundation, all of that, for about every dollar we invest, we get almost $4 back in return of that contribution. So we're so happy to see that the return on investment is good there. Looking forward to in 2022, as we reopen Central, we're going to see our wonderful genealogy volunteers come back. As we start seeing programming coming back in person, I think we'll see some more volunteers helping in that capacity. And fingers crossed, we'll have our lovely teen volunteers back this summer. We're meeting tomorrow and next week, kind of talking about what does that look like. So I'm also working with our Kansas Volunteer Commission on how can we make changes to make our volunteer program even better. So I'm looking forward to that in the year ahead. Do you have any questions? All right, with that, I will pass it on to the next person.
Hey, thanks, Amber. I just want to say thank you to you, to the friends in the foundation, and all the people that volunteer and support the library. 22,000 hours is a tremendous amount of work, and you have continued to support our volunteers through all the changes that we've experienced over the last couple of years. You've kept volunteering as a strong value, and you've kept it entertaining and connected. People are connected because of the work that you're doing. And I think about when we talk about community and one of our strategic goals, I think the work that you do with the volunteers absolutely hits on that strategic initiative. So thank you, Amber, and please pass that on to the volunteers on behalf of myself and the board. Janae, I see that you have your hand raised. Did you have a question?
I actually just had a technical question for Adam to go back to his report. I just had a question in regard to the digital usage trend. Does that include people putting books on hold online? The reason I ask is I know myself over the past 2 years, I've become much more adept at going onto my app, looking up books that I want, putting them on hold, and then I just go in the library, grab them and head on out. And I didn't know if that included that kind of digital usage.
Sure. Janae, that's physical usage because you're actually checking out a physical book at the end of that process. So the process of placing a hold online and requesting those books is just one of the ways that we can deliver physical content to you. The digital usage trend is really about all of those things that our patrons are looking at online. So they're reading ebooks, e-audiobooks, they're downloading videos, they're visiting databases, they're taking classes. There's all sorts of things that we are purchasing in terms of content that we're delivering to patrons, and this is a count of the usage of all of those materials.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it, Adam.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's a really great question, Janae, and we can maybe talk about sharing hold statistics, because you can put a hold on digital, ebooks and e-audio, and so it's a way to kind of get yourself in the line, particularly on really popular titles that we can't provide, one-to-one hold ratio on. So at this point, I'd like to invite Scott to come and give us an update on the Comprehensive Library Master Plan. Scott?
Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's see, I'll talk about Central first, and then I'll pass it over to Christian Madrigal, one of our branch managers, to give a little more detail on an aspect of the Central project. Then I'll talk about Antioch, the DeSoto, Spring Hill, and Edgerton study, and the overall timeline. Okay, so for Central, hello, I'm Scott Syme, project coordinator, and I'm here on behalf of the core team. I will, next slide, please, talk about Little Central, give an update on the move-in progress, next steps, and the timeline. Next slide. So here's a look at Little Central stats. Remember that we are a couple of months, well, a month in arrears on this. So you're looking at November, that's the latest number that we're presenting. And that we see a little bit of a dip there, and that is pretty consistent with just that normal dip that we see in the colder months of the year. And real similar on the PC session side. Next slide, okay. So over this last month, a lot of things have happened over at Central. I'll talk about a few of them here. So Titan, our construction manager, is continuing to knock off those punch list remaining items. We have had a lot of collection work occurring at Central, including shifting the kids' collection from the old shelves onto their new shelves in their new location. That work is pretty much done. And then there are some other collection related tasks that we're doing behind the scenes in preparation for getting the building back open again. We've also had a lot of IT activity working on getting the public spaces ready and also the network infrastructure. And then lastly, I'll talk about, we have started the staff training, and the first thing that we've been training staff on is how to use their new sorter. So we've been getting ready for that. And we'll hear a little bit more about training in a few minutes from Christian. Okay, next slide, please. So our next steps, we continue to work on IT and training. We're getting the building ready for phase 1 staff to return. We are holding steady with our opening date in late February. Later on this agenda, there's an action item to do one final closure at Central to transition the building back to Big Central. And after that, we'll get phases 2 and 3 staff back in the building. Next slide. Here's a look at our timeline. We're almost at the end of the Central project, green box there. And then I've got a couple of photos to show you here. Next slide. So this is our kids area. What you're looking at on the left is what the space looked like back in November. You'll see that on the right, you'll see our new kids shelving and the books on the shelves. So that's a pretty exciting development for us. Next slide. This one shows the branch space. So this is up in the front of the building. And that space looked pretty lonely back in October. You'll see that it's populated now with most of the furniture that'll live in that space. So we've made a lot of progress over there. Any questions about Central? Okay, so I'd like to introduce Christian Madrigal. He's our branch manager for Monticello and DeSoto, and he's going to talk with us about the work he and his team have been doing for training our staff.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Library Board, Commissioner Hanslick, and Sean Castley, our director of the library. My name is Christian Madrigal. I'm the branch manager of Monticello and DeSoto and the project manager for the CBU Office Etiquette and Training Team project. Next slide, please. It is my pleasure to introduce to you my colleagues that have been working on this project and are part of the team. We have Laura Blair from Learning and Development. We have Dennis Ross, the Assistant Branch Manager of Central. We have Abby Menard from Interlibrary Loan, Chris Carlton from IT, Lori Ross from Branch Services, and Mary Nicomento from Tech Services. Next slide, please. So our goals. I want to recap at December board meeting. We heard from Nate Hull, project manager of the CBU2 Moves team, where he shared that the overall reaching goal for our projects has been to open to the public as soon as possible. Office etiquette and training has taken a phase approach to help us also achieve this goal. For example, staff in phase 1, which includes admin, frontline staff, frontline branch staff, and IT, will be the first central working groups to take sessions on topics such as office etiquette, shared spaces, and stages of group development. This lineup of training and orientation has been structured in a way that will take a combination of both e-learning and in-person learning. This ensures that we provide learning and formats to suit the different learning styles that we have at the library. And thus, our goal is to set them up using tools and pathways to be successful with the new technology and spaces. We will also be utilizing best practices identified by the etiquette from previous county and library experiences. During construction, central staff have been dispersed to various locations in open office environment settings. There are approximately 140 plus staff that have been temporarily working from either Little Central, the Northeast Office Building, Antioch Library, or remotely from home. We estimate that the staff will receive approximately 7 hours each in training. In a few short weeks, they will begin the phased-in process, which will introduce these groups to working alongside potentially folks that they haven't worked with in a couple years or at all. So this will be another big change for that staff, and our goal is, again, to focus everyone for success. Next slide, please. I want to share with you briefly the training timelines for phase 1, which are on this slide. The overall training for phase 1 work groups will begin in January. Like Scott has said, we've already started training for the sorter. And we will be focusing on both patron and staff-facing technologies, which include drive-through, self-checks, laptop lending, meeting room reservations, and the technology. In February, we will be again working on expectations and etiquette for new staff in these new shared spaces. And this is something that's changed due to COVID, but on February 16th, we were planning a training day where staff can visit the building, explore the space, and practice with the new technologies in the open office environment. We're looking to pivot that to a more online setting. This would take place when we are in transition to being back open to the public. Next slide, please. Again, these are the next phases, phase 2 and phase 3. Staff will again receive similar training at least 2 weeks prior to moving back into Central. With each phase, we're hoping to take, like we do in the library, some of our learning experiences and enhance that into our training. Just for your information, phase 2 will comprise the CX Comms, materials handling and development department, and phase 3 will be finance, CX, learning and development, and then POISE. Do you have any questions for me?
Hey, Christian, this is a really great report. One of the things I want to share with the board was an article I read this week from the magazine Inc. They predict that 40% of the workforce will be working in the future in some hybrid work environment, meaning part-time in the office and part-time at home. And as you know, recently in the news, it's the labor market is getting tight. I think the library is really well positioned, particularly with the shared space model. Companies are really questioning where they can justify creating designated office space for a person that's not going to be there part of the time. And I think the way that Central, Monticello, Lenexa are all designed allows for flexibility, particularly to allow people to come and work within the location, but also, if needed, to work from home. And so there was a lot of debate about whether this open office model was going to work for us, but I think we were lucky in the sense to go with this design, understanding the position that we find ourselves today. And I think with Christian and the staff's help, finding ways for people to know correct behavior in a shared office space and being mindful and considerate of your fellow workers, it just kind of sets us up for everyone to be successful and to kind of make that transition coming back into the building, because it will look different. So great report, Christian.
Thank you, Sean.
Scott, I want to hand it back to you to give us an update on Antioch and then DeSoto and then overall timeline where we're at.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about Antioch replacement next. Go ahead to the next slide. So I want to give a little bit of a design update and talk just for a minute about public engagement. Well, with design, we're working with our architect, Dake Wells, on a one-story, one-level layout. And we've seen kind of an early plan. We're revising this and talking internally. So I'm looking forward to being able to present that to the library board, hopefully this spring. And then for public engagement, I don't have too much of an update on this, and it is tied to that design. We can go ahead and finish recording that soon, and then looking for spring for that to come out for our patrons too, to give them a nice big update on where we're at with the building. Next slide. Okay, design continues over the next few months. As that gets more solid, we'll be talking with our colleagues at the City of Merriam about our plans, about the designs and plans, and then leading eventually up to that property transfer and construction. Next slide. Okay, here's a look at our timeline. No changes since last time. And then that is what I've got for this month on Antioch. Any questions on the Antioch replacement project? Okay, let me jump into DeSoto, Spring Hill, and Edgerton renewal. Okay, next slide, please. I'll talk today about staff and public engagement, give a few next steps, and then take a look at that timeline. So on the staff engagement, we've started that. We're meeting with branch staff from all three of those buildings. We're also going to be talking with subject matter experts within the library who don't work at those branches, like IT, collections, that sort of thing. Well, let's see, for the public, we are planning to send an email survey to stakeholders, people that live in those branch service areas. And then also we're going to host a virtual listening session for the public, and we're looking at early March for that. We had originally planned to do this in person, and we're shifting to virtual for a couple of reasons. One of them is, well, we want to not conflict with Central's reopening. That will help us out on the staff side at least. And then also because of the crummy COVID situation, we want to do that virtually and not in person. Over the coming weeks, look for signage to come up at those locations to advertising the virtual session and then just general information about the project. Let's see, next steps. Go on to the next slide, please. So our next steps are to go ahead and do that community engagement and then to develop conceptual design options. As the brainstorming ideas come in from staff and the public, we'll start working on those conceptual designs. And the intent is to come back to admin and the library's admin team and the board with those options, along with budget estimates, which will help us set a direction for work that we want to accomplish at those branches. And that work is anticipated to start in 2023. Next slide. Here is a look at the timeline for just the study portion. So you'll see we're starting in that community staff and community engagement section of the project. Conceptual design after that, and then bringing options to the library board a little bit later in the spring. Any questions about this one? Okay. Lastly, I'll take a look at the overall timeline. Next slide.
Hey, Scott, I had a quick question. The virtual notices for the gathering with the community, will that be made public on the Johnson County webpage? Where are we going to advertise that?
Yeah, that'll be in person at each of those 3 locations. We'll also put a notice out on our webpage, and then the email surveys will have a link or a reminder to join that session too. Thanks, Mitra. Okay, on this slide, this is our all of these big building projects laid out for you. No change on this since the last time you saw it last month. And we'll go on to the next slide. So this is our CRP, Capital Replacement Plan timeline slide, sorry. There's a lot of activity on this one. You'll see that DeSoto, our little line is past the DeSoto box at the top left. That work is completed, the building's back open. Leewood painting is occurring this week and they'll open back up on Saturday as planned. Corinth Arc Flash is still waiting in the wings. And then we'll get into our bigger capital replacement plan projects as the year goes on. Any questions on the timeline?
Scott, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So on the Corinth closure, that through.
Okay, I think you're talking about the Corinth Arc Flash closure, and that one's been a long time coming. So that's a material supply issue, and we are hoping that work can still occur yet this, I guess, winter, late winter, and if not, then we would need to bring an action back to the library board to extend the period of closure for that one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody.
And I wanted to just close the loop on a request that the board had made at the last meeting. I've reached out to the city of Prairie Village and the city of Overland Park to kind of do a touch base on where they're at with their projects. So we have those meetings scheduled for the next couple of weeks. And they were both very interested in re-engaging with us and had information that they wanted to share. And we shared that we also had information. And so again, that's moving forward and I'll be able to report at the next board meeting the status of those two meetings. I also want to kind of share with the board that we've decided, particularly on the grand opening, to kind of downsize. Of course, you will be invited, but we had originally envisioned a much larger event, and we're just going to downsize it because we didn't know, again, where we would be with the Omicron. Today at the county, they reported a positivity rate of, I think it was 30.5, and I think the week previous it was around 22 to 23%. I think the feeling is that the Omicron has not peaked in this community, though there was some really encouraging news that on either of the coasts that they're thinking that they're past the peak, and we should see a fairly steep fall off. But if we can get that fall off before the opening, then we'll remain flexible. But at this point, we're just going with a more, I would say, cozy or a smaller grand opening for Central as far as the event goes. Any questions or concerns with that? Okay, thanks. So the next chance is one of my favorite parts of the year. I get to recognize staff. So the county has a program called Leadership in Action. Each department and agency gets to nominate people for that award. We have about between 4,400 and 4,600 employees within the county, and 26 people win this award this year. So it's a very prestigious award, and I want to recognize Ryan Dolan from our IT department. Ryan has been a real kind of linchpin on the Central CBU2. He's worked on the team that's made it happen, provided advice. Ryan, what distinguished Ryan is his willingness to step up and actually help the project manager on that team. And under his own initiative, he went through an agile project management learning and took what he learned from that and was able to support the team. Ryan is also the guy that you'll see at all the board meetings that works with Blue Fox, that works with all the streaming technology, with all the AV that's happened in our buildings, and has done a tremendous job advancing us forward. He's invigorated the team. He's just brought an energy to his work, and the library nominated him. That nomination was accepted, and then we had a virtual event, unfortunately, but we had a virtual event where we recognized him internally, and I'd like to recognize his work to you, the library board. So congratulations, Ryan. You're killing it here at JCL. And then the second person we were lucky to get to is Laura Hunt. Laura Hunt is our internal communication manager. She's the one that makes sure that every division and area within the library knows what's going on, and that both for policy changes that we might be experiencing, to training opportunities, to county initiatives, she keeps everyone up to date with the happenings, whether it's a snow emergency that we've had a couple of, or it's a staffing issue, shortage issue due to sickness. She is able to craft messages, work with the media. But she started the job, and normally we have a 90-day onboarding period, but she started it right when the coronavirus hit back in 2020 of March. And so she automatically was thrown really into helping us message what was going on. She helped with the furloughing of staff and the messaging around that. And then her partner in crime, which is Alyssa Andre, and we celebrated this. Alyssa went on maternity leave, and Laura stepped up and took over Alyssa's job. Alyssa also joined at the same time, right at the time that the pandemic started. And so both of them worked together. I couldn't imagine the organization without both of them, but we were able to acknowledge Laura for her work. She's done tremendous work with the book report, with bringing staff together and just crafting messages to the community and internally. And so I want to say thank you, Laura. Also, this recognition by the county is well deserved. Any questions surrounding leadership and action?
No, Sean, I just want to extend on behalf of the board, though, thanks. I'm sorry that we're not in person, that we couldn't actually clap, and we, alas, don't have any fun little buttons to push on Zoom to do a rah-rah, but that is more the failure of technology than our appreciation for all of your hard work, those who are acknowledged, and just all of our staffers who have gone above and beyond through these unprecedented times to get stuff done, to do it with style, with grace, to work really hard in some really untenable situations, and that has not gone unnoticed. We see you, we appreciate you, and I wish that there was something that we could do that really heartfelt acknowledges that, but this is one of the ways that we can do that, but just that everybody knows that we appreciate everything that you're doing. And if I could rah-rah yay you, I would more than that, but thank you very much on behalf of the board for everything that you all do. The admin team, our pages, our clerks, the people who shift books, that this organization would not function the way it does without all of these individuals doing, mundane things. It's Thursday and it's your job, but this system would not function without you. And so we appreciate that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hearing that stuff really appreciates that. And I think the board has come up with $1 million idea. I don't know why Zoom doesn't have an applause sound that you can click.
Much so.
Yeah, that would be great. The next piece is the Lenexa City Center Library won an award in 2020 for Lighting Design Award from the Kansas City Illuminating Engineering Society. And if you've been to that building, you'll know that at night, the lighting of that is just a beautiful, beautiful building. in the twilight. And I want to congratulate the architect and everyone who was involved with that project, and also the courage of the library board to, it's not a typical library. It's, I think it's a really a statement piece within the community center, and people really enjoy it. And the lighting just enhances that experience. So it's great to get that recognition, but it's in service of the people that we serve, our community. Next, I want to move on to the Secession Plan. If you could bring up the next slide. And let me just check if Robin Smith is on the call. I am not seeing her. This is okay. So Robin Smith was part of the Howe Street group that really helped the organization come up with a Secession Plan. Can I have next slide? So there's kind of a lot of details in this report. So we decided to break it into 3 pieces. The first part is to look at the interim solution, which is just the practical, who leaves, if someone leaves, what's going to happen. The part, and we'll talk about that today, the part that we're going to talk about in February is how do you create new leaders within your organization to grow and develop? And I'm going to talk about that part of the plan in February, and then talk about the next steps, the work that we're going to be doing in 2022. And Robin Smith from the Howe Street Group has worked with me extensively in 2021. It was a year-long project. So next slide, please. So how was this a Secession Plan aligned with our strategic initiatives? And here, the board will, you have a chance to read this, but it really ensures about expectations that management have, really about what it means to be a manager, what it means to be a leader within the organization. It also talks about how our learning and development department supports that and reports out on how that's going. Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. The learning and development annually looks and assesses and determines organizational learning needs and goes forward. Again, another strategic goal. Learning and development department reviews, designs, and prioritizes adult learning-based assessed needs. And when we're talking about adult learning, what we're really talking about is really 21st century learning. It's not really a classroom, but it's a way for people to become engaged, interact, and actually take what they're learning and are able to actualize that, able to put it into practice of everyday work. There's no use teaching someone something that they cannot then find useful in their day-to-day work. Again, learning and development connects with people assessing their needs to learning resources. So again, it's about placing those resources, the right resources. There's a whole host of learning opportunities, but we need to curate that to specifically to the goals that we're setting. And again, the learning development measures the effectiveness of learning resources. So if you're providing learning, right, that's not the end of the process. And it's not the end of the process when someone fills out an assessment form for that learning. Really, the process happens about a year afterwards, which is, hey, how are you taking what you've learned and actually using it? And if you're not, and we see that as a pattern of behavior, then we'll stop teaching that because it's, or we'll, in that way, we'll find a more effective way. So this is a way to kind of explore, kind of ideate about learning, design, develop, implement, and then measure the effectiveness of how we're creating the next generation of leaders. Next slide, please. So the first goal was to establish a leadership succession plan to mitigate business disruption. That's essentially, we're looking for business continuity. And the second goal was really to prepare the next generation of leaders. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're looking at how do we create a leadership that looks like the community that we serve, right? And how do we create those opportunities? Next slide, please. So this is how we did it. We did it through a tremendous amount of stakeholder engagement, working with myself, the administrative team, the learning and development team. We reached out to the county HR department and our liaison, and then we did manager surveys and focus groups one-on-one. We did looking at what's the county cultural documents around this topic, library culture and performance documentation and tools, beginning to assess where there are gaps. Gaps not only in looking at the pillars of performance, but also in the performance and the employee management portion of that, and ultimately connecting that to merit. So we talk about this as the employee journey. When you come into our organization, you should have a really good understanding of the development paths that will be available to you, what areas you're going to be looking at, how that's going to be scored, what resources are available to you, and then what pathways that you have. Not everyone wants to manage people or be an executive. Sometimes people want to be subject matter experts. The question is, what's the opportunity if you want to have in-depth knowledge in your area, and how can we promote leadership if you choose not to manage people, but tend to become a subject matter expert? So just kind of quickly, the nuts and bolts: if the county librarian leaves, the deputy takes the place, and then the responsibility of the deputy is then kind of spread across the associate directors. And then it goes through that again. If the deputy's position becomes available, the assistant director for branch services and the other assistant directors take on that person's position, rather than adding a new person to admin. Next slide, please. Succession planning to mitigate business disruption. The associate directors, this is really only interim solutions. They're interim solutions, particularly if the county librarian leaves and the board has to go through a hiring process. But the interim solutions are kind of a stopgap measure that allows us to go through and do that competitive posting of that position and the competitive interviewing of that. Next slide, please. Again, we're looking at the financial director's interim successor. This would be Dave's position, and the accounting specialist would take on that role with oversight from the associate directors. And this shows you really, again, in the details, how the associate director of system-wide services takes over payroll. The P cards are taken by the branch services associate director, contract authorization by the director of customer experience, and then the board related financing reporting would by the county librarian. So again, you can see that all bases are covered. And then the foundation director, if they were to leave, then the community relations coordinator would provide management support along with the associate director. Next slide, please. So next steps in our succession and leadership development. We're going to continue to meet with leadership and succession candidates, and we'll be talking a little about that and how we score that and the methodology, looking at business best practices. We'll share a high-level overview with the organization as a whole internally. We'll hold alignment and transition meetings with L&D resources, and then return in February's meeting to discuss leadership development opportunities in 2022. Next slide. Are there any questions? I know I've kind of gone through this quickly, but was there any area that gave you concern or worry? And again, I think the slides are fairly self-explanatory.
Hey, Sean, I don't have any, no concerns. I was just kind of curious. So what is the board's responsibility? I assume it's the ultimate hiring of the county librarian. Is everything else, that's pretty much it, correct?
Yeah, you as the board have one employee, that's me, the county librarian. That's by statute that you get to hire that person. Generally in the past, you formed a panel and included members from the county, and I think I remember Commissioner Lindstrom sat in as an observer, so you had a commissioner sit in at that time. That may be liaison. That's the role and responsibility, and then everything else falls to you've assigned to the county librarian, it would be considered an operational issue.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on this one?
No, Sean, I just wanted to thank you for doing this. I know that this was kind of turned into maybe a more significant lift than we had originally, excuse me, anticipated when we kind of asked for this. But I think on a whole, the organization is going to benefit, excuse me, from this, not just in terms of the continuity of business, which really was our first goal, is just practically speaking, making sure our bench was deep enough if there were transitions. But I think kind of doubling down on this and making it also a leadership opportunity and a way to overall strengthen our organization, both in terms of just its cohesion and people knowing each other and kind of cross training and all of that, that if everybody's pulling in the same direction, then everything works better. But I also think the fact that we are really institutionally going out of our way to invest in leadership is something that you don't necessarily see in government, that in public institutions, this isn't something that you tend to see. And so the fact that we kind of get to be cutting edge here and looking at a new way of doing things, of investing in our staff, not just because it's a body who comes into work to clock in to do something, but to invest in them towards being a whole person and contributing across all kinds of skill sets, I think is really, really cool that we kind of get to do that. So thank you for taking a practical kind of business operation and turning it into something really pretty cool. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how this actually plays out long term for our organization as a whole. So another yay you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I want to give a shout out also to the Logan Learning Leadership Fund, that we had a kind of a confluence of a number of things, and also to the Library Foundation that matched that very generous gift. So we have in the library, so we have resources, financial resources to put towards these leaders, and we have a structure that I'll talk about next month to talk about, what are our high potential, what are the qualities of a high potential employee that could make that transition going up, meaning it doesn't matter if you're a page or a clerk, you may have high potential and demonstrate, and we will invest in you, and you will rise up through this organization. But the skills that we provide you, we think of it as the whole person. The skills that you learn as a leader within the organization can be taken, particularly maybe communication skills that can be taken to a family Thanksgiving dinner and make your life, just the environment, a whole much better. So I think it's a holistic or human approach to this approach. So this, at this point, concludes the county librarian report. Thank you.
Hey, Beth, I just want to kind of add on to what you said. I completely agree with everything you said. And I think it's great that we're taking this approach, because even if you're training, great leaders, giving them skills, and they leave because they get a better, a different opportunity somewhere else, that I think just knowing that, they'll be available to hire back at some point, and you're not training somebody so that they leave and you lose them, because ultimately, there's that ability to bring them back. And I think as long as you keep training people and finding the right people and giving them the skills and making them leaders, then eventually, it's just going to pay off in the long run. And I just agree with everything Bethany said. And I'm glad you've taken this approach, and good job.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
All righty, any other comments? Then we are on to action. Huzzah. So we need a motion to pass our consent agenda, unless anyone has any comments, questions, or concerns about any of those details. If there aren't any, I would take a motion, please. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
And a second, please.
Second.
I second.
Fantastic. And all those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Okay, we are going to go ahead and go into new business. If when we are voting, everybody could make sure that they are unmuted so I can hear voices so that we don't have to roll call everything. That would be fantastic. Our first bit of new business is consideration of an MOU with Johnson County Elections. Sean, do you want to walk us through the briefing sheet on that?
Yep. So the first one is with the elections office. We have agreements to use the library, and this just formalizes it with the elections office for as polling places. It outlines that, and then it moves forward and outlines also the drop-off locations that we have. It also outlines the relationship that we have with the sheriff's office with the external cameras looking at those drop-off boxes to assure that there is no nefarious activities happening around them, and to also to ensure the validity and that the election count is not being altered in any way. This has been a highly successful partnership, and is something that the election office and the library would want to continue. And my recommendation is that the board move forward and adopt this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments, questions, or concerns about this MOU?
I don't have any concerns. I just want to make sure that, so the election off, they're in complete 100% control of it. We have no control whatsoever. So, you know, we can't have somebody on our end doing anything with it just because this is kind of a hot topic. And all we're doing is essentially providing the space and saying, here, you take control, you're in charge, but here's the space, correct?
Correct. If there are problems, the only thing where we have, and this happened in Blue Valley, where a ballot box became full, we would notify the elections office that if they had planned to do just one pickup a day on this, that they may need to go ahead and do 2 or 3. And because the turnout at the last election was, national election was so great, we just worked with them to say, look, you've got to come out because it's full. They responded very, very quickly and have it very secured, meaning there are 2 people that come, there's a checks and balances. And I know it's in the news a lot, but the feedback I got from the community was that that having these at the library and the ease of casting a vote in Johnson County was, they really appreciated it. We have, from staff standpoint, we have no involvement with the elections office. We just provide the infrastructure with the cameras, and we provide the location where they, for the external boxes, and then we do provide the meeting room spaces, but they manage that. They manage the equipment, all of those types of functions.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions, or concerns? Then I would take a motion, please.
I move that the Johnson County Library Board of Directors approves the Johnson County Election Office Memorandum of Understanding for the year 2022.
Thank you. And I'll take a second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Excellent. Any opposed? That motion carries. On to item B, consideration of addendum to the Olathe Public Library interlocal agreement.
So this is what the library board has been voting on for a long time, is the actual addendum. And then we had kind of addressed this where the actual agreement was, the full agreement was done in 1989. So what we're voting on today is to continue that addendum with the updates that we've done, and that in this year, 2022, library staff along with legal counsel will look at the 1989 document and do any revisions or updates that are needed to do that, working with our partner for Overland Park, sorry, Olathe, but I shouldn't get those confused, the Olathe Public Library. Again, it's been a long-standing relationship with them, and it's working extremely well. And so I would recommend that the library support that.
Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns about this MOU?
Hey, real quick, how do we come up with the 23%, 77%?
The 23% is based on population. So Olathe makes up 23% of the Johnson County population. We looked at it as in two ways when the board previously, and I think Mitra was on that board at that time, asked me to kind of look at how we were doing chargebacks to that group. We looked at several different models, but came back with a proposal that would be population-based, and it would be on direct costs that we could demonstrate that we were expanding, and that those were the numbers that we kind of came back and charged back. It had been a fairly, previous to that, it had been a fairly not as rigorous framework for doing chargebacks. We decided at that time not to do indirect costs because they were difficult to quantify.
Okay, any other questions or comments, concerns about this? Then I would take a motion, please.
I move to approve the 2022 addendum to the Olathe Public Library Memorandum of Understanding.
Second.
Thank you. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that motion carries. Okay, C, consideration of closure of Little Central to transition to full Central Resource Library.
Yeah, so this is the recommendation. There are two challenges that we're facing with this. There's a large amount where we have paneling that separates the main library from the public area that needs to be taken down. And then we have a number of computing systems, both in the two rooms, that need to be taken out and then reinstalled. When we had discussions, we discussed whether we thought we could do that while still remaining open. Just the hazard of taking down the paneling we felt was too great and would be too disruptive. So it is our recommendation to go ahead and close the library for a period of 1 week. Scott, as I'm looking at this, at my notes, do we have a date on this?
Oh, my apologies. We do. We're looking at the week of February 14th.
Sorry. So the motion, my recommendation would be we close for a week. And when I'm assuming it's a week, is this a 7-day week, Scott?
That's right. It would be from Monday the 14th all the way up through the next Monday.
Okay. So it would be Monday the 14th through until the 21st. Is that correct?
Okay. Any questions, comments, or concerns about this? I personally would feel better if we had the building closed to take down panels and do heavy lifting without, people running around. So I would take a motion.
I move that the Johnson County Library Board of Directors approves a temporary closure of Central Resource Library for a period of 1 week in February to allow for the transition of the building back to full service.
And second, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. Fantastic. And our last action item is the consideration of the closure of Central Resource for Library Let's Loose in September.
Yep. So the foundation is looking for Saturday the 17th for the day for the library to be closed. for the Library Let's Loose event, and I am forecasting that we will be out of this pandemic and back to normal for this great event.
Huzzah!
I would support this going forward.
Questions, comments, or concerns about Sean's optimism and prognostications? If not, I would take a motion, please.
I move
Go ahead, Micha.
I move that the library board approve the closing of Central Resource Library on September 17th, 2022 for the Foundation Library Let's Loose.
Second.
Oh, fantastic. We have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed? There being none, that motion carries. I believe that is the end of our business, unless there is anything else anyone feels the overwhelming urge to communicate.
There is one more informational item on new business, which David is going to give, and this is just an informational, no action to be taken, but he's going to give a very high level look at the 2023 through 2027 capital improvement plan submissions. We will be going over this with the budget committee and much greater detail, and then bringing back to the library board as part of the budget approval process. Dave, can I flick it over to you?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, as Sean said, we're just informational purposes for this month. It's at the back end of your packet. Page 80 would be the briefing sheet that goes over what we're actually requesting for 2023, and that would be approval of the 2023 CRP, which is going to be $1,949,485. I'll note that number is going to be higher than what we've seen in the past. Our good folks that help put this information together over at facilities, our project managers, Sean, Juan, and Abby, who helped put some of this documentation together, and working with the other facility project managers and some of our outside consultants. As you can imagine, inflation is and going to be rather high for construction projects. And so that number is going to be a little over 144,000 higher than where we had projected it to be a year ago from this month. So just want to prepare the board that those numbers are going to be bigger and larger. So that's one of the things that we're asking for action for in 2023. Also, we are planning on moving forward on that DeSoto Spring Hill Edgerton Library Renewal Project. As information was presented earlier, we're hoping to have some price proposals back. The $1 million that we have in there right now is a placeholder number. It's quite possible that number is the right number. It may be less or more depending on what we get back by way of the work that's being done this spring here. So hopefully we get that in place before we put a final budget proposal together for 2023. If we don't, we can always come back later and modify the number as appropriate. And the other several things are out year projects. We're still showing Blue Valley, and we're having it start as a 2024 project. So we're not asking for authorization for next year. It's the year following, with design work beginning in 2024 for that project and construction in 25 and 26 with an estimated first quarter opening in 2027. And the one thing I want to note on that too, just so people are aware, that number is larger too. It's that project's now at around 60 million, where it had been at 50. So I mean, we're expecting about a 20% increase, and that's pretty much due to estimates in our construction inflation for that project. And similarly, Corinth Library, we're showing as a start in 2027 with construction in 2028. and an opening in 2029. And that project went from being where we thought it was last year is going to be at 24.4 million, is moving up to a little over 31.1 million. So, and you know, that's probably going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 28% increase. So just want to prepare the board for that. Sean and I have been doing some work, and we plan to bring that to the budget committee next week, kind of showing how we think we can pay for this. We do think we have mechanisms that we've built in and put in place that should still allow for us to move forward on these, even with dealing with higher costs to the projects due to inflation. And also with that, let's see, and we're anticipating interest rates probably likely going up from where they are. So, but we think we have it covered, and we're going to get into more detail on that at our meeting next week. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have. Otherwise, there's pretty good documentation out at the end of your packet. Like I said, starting on page 81 through I think 99, that just kind of gets more into the details than what I have provided in that brief overview. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. That's a really great high-level report. One of the things that Dave and I, that's concerning to us, and we're meeting with the assessor's office, is particularly on commercial real estate. We know that home real estate, residential housing or multi-use housing, multi-person housing, that market is still very hot. What we don't know is what's happening with the commercial property, as far as, are we going to see that our revenues be affected by that? So again, their office is in the next couple of weeks is going to be able to talk to us. We'll be able to share with the board some kind of financial outlook. I think having the reserves that we've done have financially put us in a really good situation. And we've also got to remember that the dark store, if that is successful, the liability of about 1.2, 1.3 million that will be taken out by the state in order to repay those businesses. But again, even with that, even with the plan that we're going to share, with all the money removed for these various issues, we will still have in reserve approximately, I think, 5.6 million, if I'm remembering that right, which is between 10 and 15% of our operating budget, which is well within the range, probably on the higher end of that. So again, no matter what happens, again, with inflation or with construction costs or the dark store theory, we're positioned in a very financially secure place over the next couple of years to deal with those financial challenges. Is there any questions concerning that? That was the final item that I had on the agenda tonight.
Okay, I am going to take that as a no further comment. Yay for being fiscally cautious to weather any storm, including unprecedented inflation and rise in construction materials and arc flashes that will never be delivered. So if anybody has anything else to add, if not, then I would take a motion to adjourn, please.
I move we adjourn the Johnson County Board of Library meeting.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you everybody for your time, and stay healthy and toasty and dry this weekend with the snow. And we will see you at budget or on in February. Thank you very much.